Friend. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited and so honored today to be joined by Vanessa Aldrich, who is an opera singer, corporate girly, and a creative powerhouse. I love Vanessa's TikTok. I came across her work and was so inspired by it. I reached out and asked her to be on the show to talk a little bit more. And she said yes. And I'm so honored that she's here to talk all things creativity, artistry, shadow work, and so much more. You are a creative, if you are an artist, if you are someone who is passionate about creativity, spirituality, a number of different things of that nature, this is the episode for you. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Everyone, welcome back to the Prolific Hub podcast. I'm your host, Aaliyah Cheyenne, and I'm so excited and honored today to be joined by Vanessa Aldrich. Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for
I'm
having me.
doing good. I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for being here.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
Yes, so excited. So, some of you may have seen Vanessa's work on TikTok. I know I definitely have. I'm so inspired by the way she speaks about creativity, the way she speaks about spirituality and creativity combined. So I was so excited to reach out and have a conversation with her and have her on the show as a guest. So I'm so happy that you're here, Vanessa. I'm going to kick it over to you to have an introduction of who you are. I always like to ask folks a little bit more about who you are, how you want to be known in the world today. So I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, my name is Vanessa, and I am an opera singer and a writer living in New York, Brooklyn specifically. I also have a day job. I'm a corporate girly, as they say. I work in finance, venture capital, so very busy. Also, very new to the world, but it is true that I'm a content creator on top of it, which I kind of see as an extension of my writing endeavors. And on that space, I focus on being a survey, providing a survey of art, culture, world, religion, philosophy, all sorts of unexpected wisdom about the creative process, specifically in relation to approaching your art like a grown up, which is to say, how to stay engaged, committed, energized with your creativity, for your creativity, by your creativity for a lifetime. I pull from sources that I feel like are not as often frequented in order to kind of help us all through that journey. So that's me. But certainly, I think that as a creative person, my primary, most important space, field is as a singer. I'm an opera singer. And I've been doing that for the last, I've been, gosh, 15 years. Yeah. Writing, I think, started in earnest not that long ago, maybe in the pandemic, a bit before.
What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, with the audience. I'm so intrigued by all of that, and we're going to talk about everything. But one thing I wanted to sort of start with, so you and I had like a preliminary conversation, and it's come up again even in your introduction, reference to teachings and sacred texts that kind of lead the artist's way, like just how to be creative and how to not burn out from that creativity. And I would love to hear a little bit more about that. What are some of the texts that you've leaned on, even in your own creative work, and some of the texts that you sort of guide others to into as well?
Sure, thank you. I'll say that it started for me. Why did I kind of lean into that space? For me, it started maybe since childhood. I've always been interested in ancient civilization and history and all of that. I studied it in school, but even without college, I was always interested. But it was really punctuated by the events in my own life where I sustained significant grief and was really without a number of my primary sort of foundational family members, my immediate family, very suddenly. You know, one has to continue and one needs to know how to process at a young age. I was 20 years old, how to process insurmountable grief or seemingly insurmountable grief. And, the world that's immediately available to us is Instagram. And as I was kind of searching for healing and modalities and advice about how to carry on with that, kind of now on my plate, I found that, and I always say this, but I found that the world of Instagram truism and quotes and blurbs and kind of surface level modalities was not enough to kind of carry my spirit forward. And that forced me to go deeper. And by deeper, I mean older. And so that sent me kind of in earnest into some of the world's most durable sources for wisdom, be it mythology or certainly, comparative religious texts or esoterica, mysticism, philosophy, whatever. I found that within the durability of these sources, how old they were, there was so much information that got to the core of what I was experiencing, and also wisdom about how to carry on. And for me, that kind of crystallized what my focus would be. And there was just infinite material there. And so for me, if it's durable, if, for example, where I'm searching and surveying spiritual sources from traditions that were kind of written down, wisdom that was written down thousands and thousands of years ago, separated by time, and various cultures were saying the same thing, and there's all these through lines, all these patterns, all these agreements about what is most important and necessary for the human soul. That was really important to me. If someone 5,000 years ago was saying something about grief, about fear, about shame, about happiness, that felt significant to me. That the fact that it would resonate thousands and thousands of years ago allowed me to latch onto it. And I think that there's something to that. There is obviously things that change in our landscapes as society. The things that we are dealing with in 2024 are very different than what they were dealing with in 2000 BC India. But there are things that are the same. And that similarity is very powerful, very stabilizing to me. Just even hearing that someone could write it down thousands of years ago and it would still register did so much just for my grief alone. But to answer your question, after that background, a lot of the work that I refer to is in ancient myth and also the study of ancient myth. There are thousands of stories that all sort of follow the same pattern of how the soul struggles and what are the lessons that every human must face before they can matriculate on to the next sort of lily pad, if you will, in their spiritual unfolding. The fact, again, that there's that similarity, that every myth follows the same pattern. And it is a story about what happens for all of us. I think there's a lot of wisdom in myth. Also, say this a lot about the spiritual texts, be it, I was raised Christian. I always wanted to be Catholic, but my family was Protestant. So I'm really familiar in those traditions, but I've since learned, about the Tao, about Hindu tradition, about Buddhism, and so on, about indigenous wisdom. And I always say this, but in 5,000 years of written spiritual texts, every single one of these traditions, separated by time, separated by an ocean, whatever, they all refer to their God as the creator. And so if God is the creator, what am I? If God is creative, if God is the creator and I'm creative, rather, what does that say? One, about my own creativity. And two, more importantly for me, as a researcher, as a student, what does that say about those texts? And so I began to reread these texts, of course, the Bible, but the other mystic texts within sort of larger Christian Catholic mysticism, or the Tao Te Ching, or the Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, etc. rereading those texts specifically, diligently, from the perspective of being creative blew my mind. I would say that if anyone were to go back and reread any Bible verse, any quote, the Lord's Prayer, any of the Yoga Sutras, any passage, any chapter from the Tao Te Ching, etc., from the interior castle, from the inner chapters, any of these texts, I have the belief that in 5,000 years of documented spiritual texts, all of these traditions separated by time, oceans, culture, everything, if all of them on their own time and in their own way have come to articulate that God is the creator. If God is the creator, then what am I? If God is the creator and I'm creative, what does that say? One, my own creativity. Perhaps that it is divine. Perhaps that my creativity itself is my umbilical back to the essential most energy of the entire cosmos. Two, and more specifically for my own use and my own process and my own difficulties in life, if I were to go back to one of these texts, I was raised in the Christian tradition, to have a slightly different relationship than the one that I was raised in. But if you could do anything, if you wanted to read the Bible, if you wanted to read the Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, the Tao Te Ching, the inner chapters, the interior castle, the dark night of the soul, any of these foundational texts, rereading them specifically with your creativity in mind, the wisdom that you would find would blow your mind. I really believe that rather than it being some sort of wisdom about how to get into heaven, how to forgive yourself after you were, I don't know, after you had a gay chapter in college or after you stole something when you were a kid. It's not about that. I mean, it is, but if you were to reread it with the idea, with the thesis that in the beginning God created, that creativity is the most essential energy of the universe, and it is also the purpose of the human life. Rereading these books, these sources that are meant to guide us in our spiritual path, my thesis is that you reread them again with the idea that they're supposed to also guide us in our creative path and spiritual path are one and the same.
Yes, yes. I think that's so profound. You even have this ability to speak about something as heavy as grief so poetically. And I think that's such a beautiful skill. But I love this idea of this through line that even in any of these texts, having some of them having been 5,000 years ago to now, there's still a through line of the human spirit, what it takes to be creative, what it takes to suffer and overcome that suffering. So I think that's just so profound. There are a couple of pieces in that that I would love to talk about a little bit more. So
Oh.
I think on the side, grief, like
Mm.
in a simpler way, I've heard it described as the final act of love or a reminder that love existed. And I think that's really beautiful. But we've also talked about how grief is a natural part of artistry and creativity, and how sometimes going deeper, as you've described for yourself, is a way to really touch the core of creativity, get to the center of it. So I would love to talk a little bit more about how artists, how the creatives can really go a little bit deeper, even in grief, um, to create and what that might look like.
Yeah, I love this question. How to go deeper as an
Mm-hmm.
artist. And my belief, again, just in my own experience and in this survey, not as a scholar, because I'm not, but just as a
Mm-hmm.
student,
Yes.
someone who needs wisdom, is that the soul wishes to make use of our life. And our soul wishes to make use of our life on behalf of our creativity. That creativity, no matter what, no, I don't care who you are, is the objective. That is why we're here. To add context, color, dimension to consciousness, but human consciousness. What does my life teach me? And I certainly believe that we all go through a season needing to get to the meaning. If something bad happens, if something dark happens, if something confusing happens, you go through it. It's challenging, it's difficult. But then we have the responsibility to look at it again,
Yes.
second time, and ask ourselves, what is this trying to teach me? What is this trying to show me about life? What I have encountered is, I think this question comes up a lot when people ask me, how do I figure out what my talent is? How do
Mm.
I figure out what my purpose is? What am I supposed to do with my creativity? I know I'm creative, but what am I supposed to do with it? I don't know exactly what is this. What are the specifics of my gift?
Yes.
And say that all artists are tasked with mining for meaning in our lived experience. And I think what needs to happen first is a release of shame. I think that our culture in the West really conditions us to carry shame about the difficulty, that there is this unspoken process, there is this influx of media, the way that we even pursue, ingest, consume healing modalities these days is about something happened to you, go over there, deal with it, and then come back when you're like the rest of us. And I think a lot
Mm.
of people feel that way. Certainly felt like there was something wrong with me or wrong with my life or something delayed or stuck for having experienced grief or any of the things that happened before it, which were frankly much more difficult than the grief.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Having the courage to release the shame that there's something bad about you for experiencing difficulty so that you can then be reanimated and pursue the project of figuring out, what is this profound difficulty trying to teach me? What am I supposed to learn? And when I kind of figured out that, for example, then it becomes easier to start approaching the question, what are the specifics about my creativity? How do I go deeper, as you say? How do I ask myself more meaningful, more adult, more sophisticated questions about my creativity? And you begin to approach these questions not from the perspective of shame, fear, but from the perspective of love. So in my case, all this, the book of Job level grief, and I know I'm referencing the Bible a lot, but I'm not here to convert
No,
or
it's
anything.
it's
It's just
totally fine.
thank you. Perhaps the first 25 years of my life was really profoundly devastating. It could be a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so as I'm wading through that all by myself, and I don't really have a lot of peers who have experienced that kind of stuff, I didn't
Yeah.
then. From the perspective of shame, from the perspective of fear, my story is, why did this happen to me? I can't believe this happened to me.
Mm.
It's not fair that this happened to me. And in a lot of ways, that is true. And it is a big question. Why am I suddenly without any immediate family members? Why is
Mm.
there no adult on earth that is concerned with how Vanessa is doing today?
Yeah.
That's tough.
Mm-hmm.
But from the perspective of love, that same question becomes, I'm so glad this happened to me. Because now I understand intimately
Mm-hmm.
the experience, the universal experience of grief.
Yes.
Death is inevitable,
Yes.
right? It's as is disappointment, heartbreak. Heartbreak is
Mm-hmm.
something that people struggle with so much. They think there's something wrong with them, ending up in a situationship or being heartbroken
Mm-hmm.
for a really long time or whatever. They feel shame from the heartbreak alone is enough. Then
Mm-hmm.
there's this other layer where you feel bad for having experienced something, but it's inevitable. And from the perspective of love, with that interrogation, looking at your life in this heroic way, in this spiritual way, heroic as a reference to looking at my life from love in this way, now I see that my gift is that I can help people understand inevitability. Like I get it. Is it easy? Are there tears? Of course. But my point is that if you align yourself with the things that all these books are saying,
Mm-hmm.
love, this concept of grace, that you always have it, that there's nothing wrong with you, that you're not broken, etc. You understand what your gift is. And I feel that way. I feel that there's a depth that has been excavated within me,
Yes.
which at the end of, there is that clawing, that excavation process, which is painful. But then what you realize you have is an empty cup that will be poured into.
Yes.
So that's how I'd answer that. And then I also like to talk about overcoming shame is shadow work, which I talk a lot about on my page.
Yes.
That's another thing that helps how to really get through the shame other than waiting for life to do it for you. You can be
Mm-hmm.
mindful. I think that's something that's been pivotal in my creative process too, specific, not just a spiritual process, not just something that I can report to my
Mm-hmm.
therapist. I
Mm-hmm.
did it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if it means me finding more stuff to get on the page, shadow work is a tremendous tool.
Yes. Yes. And I would love to explore that a little bit more, just because you've mentioned so many things that relate to that: grief, shame, feelings of why me, or unworthiness in some instances as it pertains to heartbreak, like so many of these things. And I've talked about shadow work a little bit in the past on the podcast and why it's so important. I've also expressed that it's the theme we constantly hear about online, but at the core of it, it is really important to fully integrate all aspects of yourself to be a fully realized human being. Like, it's important work. So I would love to just hear some of your additional thoughts around shadow work and how a creative or an artist really going deeper into that space can really impact their creative and artistic work profoundly, and why it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you for that question because I agree with you that shadow work is so important. And again, it's I work with people one on one. I have this shadow work process that I'm very proud of. It's shadow work specifically for the creative process.
I
And
love
then
that.
when I work with people one on one, I always say I'm not interested in how you communicate with your partner, how you manage your finances. I'm here to give you tools for your creative process and nothing else. If there's overlap, so be it.
Yeah.
But using these tools again, like if I'm reading these texts, it's not so that I can brag about it to my priest. It's it's just going to help me, and I selfishly, like ravenously, go to it
Mm-hmm.
as a sort of cheat code. And these spiritual texts talk about shadow work as well, in terms of the spiritual unfolding,
Yes.
how to get through it. And again, if we take the spiritual process as something that is synonymous with the creative process, we are meant to really go to war to the best of our ability with shame. Shame
Yeah.
is the mechanism that is the fundamental mechanism when people talk about shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
Your shadow is any version of yourself that is unknown to you. It's locked away. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
access to it. You can't see it. It's far away in your subconscious. You're unaware of it. The mechanism that supports that kind of separation is shame. Shame is this policing agent. There's something that you learned, or several things that you learned that were not beneficial for you to keep in your conscious personality. So if it's something like anger or jealousy or something tailor-made like that, someone taught you, you learned that it was safe, beneficial for you to banish that characteristic into your subconscious, and shame is the mechanism that keeps it there. So much so that if you come near it in your daily life, some coworker that demonstrates this, there's some aspect of your creativity that demands this of you, but because it's locked away, shame won't even let you come near it. And we know that creativity is about putting more and more of yourself onto the page, onto the canvas, more deeper, more sophisticated, more honesty every damn day, which is why it's so hard. How do I do this? Certainly, that's what I believe. It's not simply about becoming more and more talented, more and more impressive
Mm-hmm.
as the older you get. It's about being more honest.
Yeah.
Using shadow work to mine for the parts of yourself that are locked away is a powerful tool. Looking at having the courage to hold a safe container around shame. So, which is to say, I'm not going to say if I have an anger management issue. I'll use a real example, something that I've had to work through, vanity.
Mm-hmm.
Vanity and something that feels like narcissism, something that feels like the bimbo, just always taking selfies, center of attention kind of a girl. I had a lot of shame about that growing up. And I didn't want to, it was wrong to me. Shame turned that personality into a type of morality. That being that kind of girl was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That the way to really get ahead is to be intelligent. And certainly growing up where I did, in a part of the world that was very racist, things like beauty, the spotlight, were not allowed for Black women, yellow Black girls. Nobody wanted a little Black girl to feel beautiful. That's not how you get attention from your teachers, from your colleagues. You have to be smart. And
Yeah.
certainly that was true of my grandfather who raised me, etc. My parents who raised me, my mother,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, single mom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my grandpa was born in 1931, South Carolina, youngest of 13. He needed to be
Wow.
smart, impressively
Yeah.
smart. And so I was learning that was good. So I had
Mm-hmm.
shame about that. But when you hold a safe space where you don't go into this project to attack vanity, perhaps in my case, with more shame, saying, get rid of the shame.
Mm-hmm.
No, the shame is what's telling you that it's bad. What you need to do is, and that's what shadow work is leaning in and saying, gosh, it's okay that you have this. It's neutralizing the energy so that you can lean in and discover that part of you in the same way that you've discovered any of the other things that are conscious, perhaps my intelligence. I know the lateral limits of intelligence and what that gets me, when to use it, when not to use it, how to be responsible for it, how it gets a little out of whack. You need to do the same for something that you've been ashamed of. Learn it, take responsibility for it. And then once you release the shame, suddenly me, an aspiring opera singer, who I need to be in the spotlight. I
Mm-hmm.
always tell people this, I don't think people know this. Opera is the only art form that I know of where people buy season tickets to boo.
Wow.
Where you are sitting there. I mean, it's a huge auditorium, 50 pieces of orchestra played by virtuosic musicians who practiced 8 hours a day since they were 5 years old, singing serious material on a stage, spotlight, and I'm not singing with a microphone, and I'm singing in a foreign language, heavy subjects.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that if I'm afraid, if I have shame about the spotlight. My artistry
Yeah.
needs me in that space. And I discovered, and I was not doing the shadow work, one, intentionally, two, sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
shadow just confronts you, and then you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But what I discovered, again, because I wasn't doing it on behalf of my creativity, I was just trying to get through some triggers.
Yeah.
Then when I do that work, I discover suddenly this vanity is part of me.
Yes.
And now I'm grounded in the spotlight in a way that I've never been because since I've been doing this when I was very small, I've always struggled with terrible stage fright.
Mm-hmm.
Is that stage fright, as a lot of people think, there's something wrong with them, that they're not good enough, and that's what starts going in your mind. I'm nervous, so I must not be good enough for this stuff. No, or perhaps there's just a shame that is policing you from being present with the obligation and demands of your own art. And
Yeah.
you
Your
would
full
know that because
expression. Mm-hmm.
exactly, you get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Full expression, exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't know that you were missing it because you can't see it because it's in your subconscious. But now suddenly
Yeah.
I have a part of my creative animal is bubbling up. I am in the spotlight. I am hanging out. I am making eye contact with my
Yeah.
audience, demanding their attention.
Yes.
And that voice that says that's bad is gone, which makes me a better servant of my art. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is applicable to as many things. Maybe there's shame that you have about how you were raised. Maybe you were raised poor. Maybe you were raised in a modest, you know, second generation family who was taught not to want the big thing. Or what? There's an infinite iterations of this. I think people would be shocked to learn how just without effort, and that's my favorite part of shadow work, is that the integration of the shadow happens in seconds.
Mm.
Seconds. That's how wise we are.
Cool.
That's how intelligent all of
Mm-hmm.
this is. What takes forever is the resistance.
Yeah.
You face it, take a deep breath through that feeling when someone calls you, like 10, 15 years ago, someone were to call me vain, I would have
Mm-hmm.
started a fight with them.
Yeah.
Or something. I would have written some sort of essay about how I wouldn't have been able to handle it.
Yeah.
Take a breath, ask yourself, maybe that is true of me, and maybe it's okay.
Mm.
And then click. You
Oh
have
my
yourself. You have
goodness.
more of yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You said you talked about this on your podcast. Is this?
Yeah,
I,
not in as beautifully and poetically as you did, but just this idea that, and I use the example of anger too,
mm,
or sacred rage as I like to call it. But
yes, exactly. You get it.
yeah, like just understanding that all of these are aspects of us, and how can we use these things that we push to the back of our minds, that we hide in our
Yeah.
subconscious, that we like to ignore, that we like to keep buried. How do we pull that into our being and use it as fuel for our work, use it as fuel for showing up as our full selves in life? And I just love the way that you brought that answer full circle, and how you were taught that vanity is something wrong or something to be hidden, but how you use it so masterfully in your work as an opera singer, because your opera
Yeah.
singing work, it demands it, it requires it. And without it, how could you fully be present in that role? I think that's so profound. I love the way that you described being a servant to your art. I think I got chills when you said that, because that's so important. And I think there are so many aspects of ourselves that people love to just hide and bury and keep
Yes.
shut away, and that they deny and they don't want the world to see.
Yes.
And I'm a firm advocate that those are things that ultimately can only serve you and your larger purpose if you learn to harness them and fully integrate them. So I just think that's so profound. I
Yes.
got
I
chills.
mean, I love what you said because I mean,
Yeah.
again, I started by saying this, that if God is the creator, this is my question almost every day. If God is the creator, what,
Yes. Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
which excites the process? I think a lot of people hear this stuff doing the work, or perhaps they
Mhm.
hear the stuff and it reminds them of therapy. It reminds them of doing the
Yeah.
work, or it reminds them of something that's a little bit too difficult to
Mhm.
understand, or a little bit too far away, rather. Maybe they know they need to do it, like you need to go to therapy, you need to quit smoking, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's not, so what? I don't really care. But if I remind myself every day that I'm creative, that's my foundation, which allows me to say that, okay, if I'm creative and God is the creator, that might mean that I'm okay. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with me, that there's
Yeah.
nothing that can permeate my self concept that is so bad, because that is the
Yeah.
threshold. And it's been written by other people for thousands of
Mhm.
years. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
there's some context here. I'm supported. So if I can say, all right, no matter what it is, no matter what I find, if I'm if I'm the human iteration of the creator,
Yeah.
let me just see. Let me just go in there.
Yeah.
Let me be excited
Yeah.
to discover more. And
Yes.
I will say, just back to the opera example of it, just make it come like so just make it come home, I think.
Yeah.
At least that's how it hit home for me.
Mhm.
I was in a studio environment with my teacher in front of a bunch of my peers in a rehearsal space. And classical music is known for being, there's no HR in classical music. It is rigorous. It is more like a martial art than anything. It is
Mhm.
brutal. The how intense the feedback is. I was singing in a workshop scenario, and my teacher stopped me and he was like, I'm so disappointed. And I'm like, that's how it goes. All teachers kind of speak like that. So you're like, okay, what are you gonna say? But something was kicking up in me, and I started to feel it,
Yeah.
which to me, in my understanding of things, that means something needs
Needs
to
to be
listen.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
There's something real.
Yeah.
It's not just some teachers wasting my time, just which happens. No, there's something for me in whatever he's about to say, even though it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable. And he
Yeah.
was saying, I'm very disappointed in you, and I started to get emotional, which is a sign of that the shadow is confronting itself. That's when you're
Yes.
confronting your shame. It's deep. It's devastating.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I went through that like a couple days ago.
Yeah,
Continue.
yeah.
Yeah.
Probably get one in 15 minutes. Um, no, so my teacher's like, I'm very disappointed in you. And I'm like, gosh, okay, let's hear it. And he's like, gosh, it's just not, you're just doing all this stuff. And it's just, I can't believe you haven't made the progress yet. Something like that.
Mm.
And I just
Yeah.
started to get so emotional. And I was advanced enough in my own process to say, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to bring all of me and say something. Either that means that he's going to realize that he's wrong if I speak authentically, and then we'll forge the new path from that understanding, or I'm going to realize that I'm wrong. So I said, to my teacher, I was like, it just really hurts my feelings that you would be disappointed in me because of X, Y, and Z. You know how hard I've worked. You know what I've been through. And for you to say that I can't believe you didn't get it. No, it just makes me feel like you are discrediting all the work that I've already done. And he said, Vanessa, that's your problem. That's your problem. You're sitting there on stage as an opera singer, wanting people to know how hard you're working. And that's what was wrong with my singing. Technically, the singing was labored. My body was getting tired. It's not efficient singing. I was working too hard.
Yeah.
Because that was my value system. I was trying to show, and so my teacher said,
Yeah.
you're so busy trying to show us how smart you are. But singing is about having a beautiful voice. You're a
Yeah.
beautiful woman with a
Yes.
beautiful voice.
Mhm.
Sing that way.
Yeah.
Which collapsed all of this shadow stuff that we're talking about right in my face.
Yeah.
And I didn't even, and to get really specific about opera, there's all these different genres, there's all these different styles within opera, and all of them about which one you're going to sing the best is entirely physiological. Whatever
Yeah.
anatomy you have, that's where your throat goes. You sing
Okay.
that genre,
Yeah.
right? And the style that I am best at is called bel canto, which literally means beautiful voice, beautiful
Wow.
singer.
Wow.
That's in my body.
Yeah.
And I had shame about that. And so now when I sing, I'm not perfect at it, but now the energetic, the thing that just flies, and I'm getting goosebumps, the thing that flies out of me is this communication about myself, which is to say, rather than squirming on stage, being nervous and be like, okay, I prepared really hard. I studied all the history and I did all this stuff and I'm really smart. And I did frantic energy that registers as stage fright.
Yeah.
Audiences don't like that.
Yeah.
Now, when I sing, I try to. The thing that I communicate is that I am a beautiful woman with a beautiful voice
Yes.
and I have something to say
Yeah.
beautifully.
Yeah.
That'll take care without me even having to try.
Mhm.
Takes care of stage fright, which is, I think, what is meant in all these texts that we can't even conceive of how supported we are.
Yeah. My goodness.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes it really
That's the
salient.
grace, the work, and
Yeah.
that's another thing. They call it the work. We think it's discipline. Doing the work, we think it's like, oh, I gotta be disciplined. It's the
Mhm.
grace. It's look, I just gotta. It makes it, and the people say like, oh yeah, like those like podcast bros, those motivation
Yeah.
videos, or yeah, like after some time, the discipline. No, it really
Yeah.
is grace.
Grace. Yeah.
That's where the mind, the thoughts, the shame
Mm.
cannot. It cannot be there. It can be there in your relationship. It can be there in all these other things.
Yeah.
But when you're really locked in the way that you're supposed to, all you're doing is floating, or if not being carried.
Yeah.
Floating, all
Oh.
you're doing is following instructions.
Yeah.
And what's
Mhm.
more than that?
My goodness. I love that so much, even down to the simplicity of the genre that you're in and really embodying that in a moment where you are being confronted with the overperforming or the validation from the audience. Like just
You get it.
soaking into. Yeah, that's so
And this is what
good.
I mean that the shadow, quite literally,
Yeah.
just I'm sharing it because it's an example
Yeah.
of the process, but also my own, I had shadow. Literally, if somebody were to call me beautiful, I'm sure a lot of people know this. If somebody were to call me beautiful, I would have squirmed, I wouldn't have related, or I would have wanted to follow up. No, I'm smart. I went to UC Berkeley, I was a triple major, went to grad
Yeah.
school, all these things.
Yeah.
But if I went and did my shadow work, there's a parallel to what my gift is.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
it's not, you don't even have to search for the parallel. It is a line that, again, that's why I say do the shadow work. And that's what a lot of my work is when I do one-on-one stuff. A lot of my TikTok stuff is about that because I just think it's a gold mine.
Yeah. It is. And it's so profound. Something else that you brought up multiple times that we keep coming back to is this idea of gift and this
Hmm.
idea of divinity and creativity. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that because we talked about that before. I think the way that you expressed it, which I thought was so profound then, was, creativity is a way for the universe to expand itself or something along those lines. You said something like that. And I thought that was so profound. And I've had a guest on the show in the past, Lavon Briggs, who describes herself as a co-creator with the creator.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
many women that I trust that inspire me when it comes to creative work see that parallel. They see no separation between spirit, divinity, creation, and
Zero
God.
difference. Yeah.
And I have always felt strongly about that, even in my own personal life. I've only felt
Mm.
like more recently I hear more people expressing that in a way that's not sacrilegious. Like, I don't know if that's the right word, but I felt like in previous spaces or places to say something like that is almost kind of like taboo or looked down upon. And now I'm in a space where I'm hearing that more, and it's more accepted, I would want to say, in some spaces, not every space. But I would love to talk to you a little bit more about that because I also feel strongly that spirituality, creativity, divinity are deeply aligned.
Yeah.
I like to go back to the saying, I don't know exactly where I got it from, but it's something along the lines of, if God is the ocean and I'm a drop of the ocean,
Yes.
what am I? And I want to talk to you a little bit more about how we can express our divinity through our work, because we all have that, and how we can really channel that divinity through our gifts. I love the way that you spoke about your sort of progression with really tuning into one of your many gifts. And for someone else who might be trying to figure that out, might not recognize the divinity within themselves or how that relates to their creativity. I know that's a big question, but I would love to talk to you a
Is
little bit more about how we learn to channel that energy better, I guess
how
is
do
the
we
best
learn
way.
to channel? Yes. And I
Yeah.
would say my approach, certainly, again,
Yeah.
I'll say it a lot only because I say it to myself and I think it's important. We say words like divine. We think that we're suddenly going to start speaking mystical language, that we're going to start sounding like priests or mystics or healers, or that we're going to be sounding religious. And what we do, how do I channel the divine? Does that mean that you have to start repackaging the Bible in your writing in order for it to be divine? No. I think that I just did a kind of a month of workshops on mythology. Like I said, I referenced that before.
Yeah.
And the hero is myth. The protagonist of every myth is the hero. Yet the hero is someone who has mastered the art of approaching the obstacles on their path in their story. If you take Luke Skywalker, it's my favorite. Luke Skywalker is an example of someone who has mastered learning how to see the obstacles in their path. The encounter with Darth Vader, for example, as an essential tension point, growth point, teacher, difficulty, seeing difficulty as an ally. I say that an
Mm.
ally in force.
Mhm.
Seeing the difficulty in your life as an ally in your unfolding. In the unfolding, the objective is to become not only Skywalker from Tatooine, ordinary man. The hero has mastered the art. It is a metaphor for all of us about what is required for the journey, which is this surrender to difficulty as an ally, to go from being an ordinary man to an eternal man. And so, to answer your question about how to put the divine into your work, one of the biggest lessons from this for me has come from the writing side of my process. Channeling the divine is about essentially creating a work in which God, the intelligence of the universe, however you want to define it, God is accessible to other people, because without accessibility, we don't have the brains to comprehend everything. We certainly can't comprehend how big the ocean is, let alone how intelligent
Yeah.
divine energy is. We don't really understand the divine.
Mhm.
If you do the work to understand in the heroic way, like I said, what about your life is eternal, which is to
Yeah.
say, what about your life has happened that relates not only to, that is not about you, but is about other people? Like, what did this event teach me, not only about life, but about other people?
Yeah.
What are we all going through? James Baldwin says that is when you make your first breakthrough,
Mm.
because it's not only about you. What happened to you doesn't matter. What matters is that if you can communicate what happened to everybody else, allowing your your work to be a cathedral in which other people experience the sacred, which is to say, there is not some lesson about how to convert to Christianity. All I mean is that you get there, you experience God. God is accessible, which means
Yeah.
that if you are an audience member, as all audience members are, carry some terrible secret with them into the auditorium, into the museum, and you open a book. You got a brand new novel, a brand new book of poetry, and you're reading it because someone recommended it to you, but deep down, there's something inside of you that
Mm-hmm.
needs to be understood.
Yeah.
Deep down, even you could be watching Fast and Furious 10, but you're hoping for 10 seconds where somebody says something that
Yeah.
moves
Yeah.
you. And it's not something that you can tell a partner. It's not in your notes app. It's not your therapist doesn't know it. Your Google search doesn't know it. It's just you. And you go to art to be understood in that way. So if we can get out of our own way a little to answer your question, how to channel the divine,
Yeah.
begin a journey of asking yourself, what has happened to you? What is it? What does it mean? Travel the distance away from your own feelings about what happened to you. Crawl, as one of my favorite poets, William Safford says, crawl on hands and knees on an unmarked trail to where other people have forgotten something. No matter how tired we are or how lowly we arrive, we must find something forgotten by everyone alive.
Mm. Wow.
Crawl to find meaning about other people in your own life, with whatever process, put that into the work. And again, it doesn't have to be, and now we convert to Christianity. That's not the divine. It's, I want someone to feel seen. You know what I mean? And so there's this blend of what happened to you and you having mastered your talent, which is the five, something that happens exists in the five senses. Singing, voice, painting, sensory, it's physical, it's human. You blend those two things, and only in that combination do other human beings know that they're not alone. You know what I mean? Be it some beautiful, devastating poem about grief,
Yeah.
or be it the beauty of a water lily like Monet.
Mm.
God, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I
You
love
know?
that. Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that is how I answer the question.
No, I mean, that's good stuff. I think that's so thoughtful in terms of what I was trying to ask, because I know it was a big question, but I love this idea of just going in the hidden room inside of yourself, like recognizing what's going on there and finding ways to express that so that others might meet you there too. Finding
Being ways to
commonality, being
relate.
seen. Yeah, relate to it. Like I I love that. I think that's really good. And
Yeah, find a different way. There's this anecdote that I've heard in some of my education where,
mhm,
talking about these old traditions,
yeah.
where these, in a more traditional society, the women would gather. I'm messing up some of the story, but just for simplicity's sake, you know, women would gather, and when they would gather in this particular ceremony, any woman who had gone through something difficult would be allowed to say it. And they would tell her story, and everyone who would listen would have undivided attention. And if she was crying, they would cry. There was a witness. What happened to you? Tell us. And you can tell that story over and over. You have undivided attention. The ceremony doesn't end until you're done telling the story.
Yeah.
You can do that 3 times. On the fourth time, if you feel compelled to get up, you must tell the story differently.
Mm, mhm.
From your old story, which again is what happens in every single myth. The hero, Luke Skywalker, Dorothy, when she's in black and white in Kansas, Neo in the Matrix, there's a fight to get past the vice grip of their foundational story, which is really probably your parents' story. It's not your story. And that's what
Mhm.
James Baldwin meant. That is your first breakthrough,
Yeah.
who you actually are, which is to say your first articulation of who we all are.
Yeah. My goodness, this is so good. I feel like I could listen to you and talk to you forever, but I know we have to be mindful of time. So
Yeah,
just
yeah. So yeah, keep me on. I could talk forever. As part of being an opera singer, that's something I had to wrestle with. My shadow journey. I was sound my own voice. So
hey, I love the sound of it too. It's great. Like I'm soaking it all in. I feel like I'm a
good.
sponge right now. This is so good, but I do want to be mindful of time. So there are a couple of other just like last
Sure.
questions that I really wanted to jump into with you.
Sure.
I know when we kind of spoke a little bit, we talked a lot, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier in this conversation. There's just so much stuff in our face. We're forced to consume,
Yes,
like everything is commodified.
yes,
But I also think on the other side of that like as a creative and as an artist, there's an extent to which you do want people to consume your artistry and your work. So
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
would love to know some of your thoughts around balance in this space in a society where we are pushed to consume, where there's so much to be commodified. How does the artist make way for their creative work, for their artistry, and how they essentially want people to consume that in a way
Okay.
too? Like how do we balance that?
The question is how to balance like the part of putting yourself out there that perhaps feels scary but also feels gross.
Yeah. And yeah, in a way. Yeah.
How to balance that and how to do it anyway, how to get over the fear. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like in touch with the divine. Am I somehow polluting it by slapping a price tag on it,
Yeah.
making there a Black Friday sale so that people buy it?
Yeah. And
Am
you
I
know what's
somehow
funny? Pollution is the word I wanted to use a second ago, but I was like, let me not use that. But hey, I should have.
no, say it because that's how people feel. Say the
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, I mean, of course we all feel that way. I have a couple, I don't know if I can answer it quickly. I can't answer anything quickly, but I'll do my best.
No, go for it.
But I do have an answer. And
Yeah.
one, and we've reiterated this a lot, so hopefully by now it's clear. But again,
Yeah.
who you are in the material world, the obligations that we have in the material world, paying the rent, showing up to work on time, graduating high school, graduating college, that is not our soul. Perhaps
Yeah.
there's some overlap.
Yeah.
Perhaps perhaps the soul is dancing and tickling, animating these things, but that's not who I am.
Mhm.
And if we really want to lean in, these things that have caused grief in us, the fact that the rent is always due and it's so expensive, the fact
Mhm.
that I can't go to the hospital without having to pay somebody $10,000, et
Mhm.
cetera, and so forth. The fact that I dropped out of graduate school, my graduate degree in voice, I dropped out and I still owe $30,000. That's not my, I mean, some of that is my responsibility, but the fact that
Yeah.
that system exists and the fact that that system is oppressive is not my fault and
Yeah.
it's not my responsibility. So
Yeah.
step one, release yourself from this habit, which we are taught that that oppressive, exploitive system is our nature. That's what we're taught. That
Woo.
to put something on the marketplace and to consume, it is, we are taught that it is human nature for that to be corrupted. It's human nature, so you have to deal with how difficult it is.
Mhm.
It's not true. We have to
Right.
do the work of disentangling their exploitive process, which keeps us in some sort of prison, at least in certain metrics,
Mhm.
from our ethics.
Mm.
That's not my morality. Those aren't my ethics. In a really crude example,
Yeah.
400 years ago, it was illegal and immoral for a black person to, let alone be free, but to learn how to read.
Mhm.
So would it have been wrong for me to learn how to read? That oppressive
Hmm.
system is not morality.
Yeah.
Let's really get a grip on that
Yeah.
aggressively
Yeah.
in a mighty fashion. Like, let's be
Mhm.
honest about that. Then let's contextualize it even further. You putting $35 on one of your little watercolors
Mm.
is not the same as being some multi-billionaire who conspires with law, and international apparatuses of every variety in order to maintain this wildly oppressive, exploitive system, robbing value from millions and billions of workers.
Yes.
That's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
they're telling you that it is the same thing because they're telling you that that billionaire process is human nature. You
Mhm.
are trying to stay alive. Now, back to what we are saying about the purpose of it.
Yeah.
Given your divine inspiration, you did the work of figuring out new language for your story about what happened to you and what it all means. After that divine inspiration season where you're like, oh my God, I'm so grateful I got it and you got it out, you have work to do. You have to get it out. How else are people going to see it? You you have to find it. that is the responsibility, that it has to find somebody else. Now, if they find it and they don't like it, that's also part of it, because if you did your part and somebody doesn't like it, that's also the experience that was meant to happen. So it's not about your glory. You have to
Yeah.
do your part and get it out there.
Mhm.
And if that means having to do some annoying marketing campaign thing, buying some marketing course and figuring it out,
Mhm.
hiring some brand girly on TikTok, charging,
Mhm.
do it.
Yes.
And be honest about the fact that you have not suddenly become an evil billionaire by charging $20 an hour for whatever it is that you do.
Yeah. Yes.
People are also thirsty to consume the right thing.
Mhm.
We are being
Yeah.
we are fed things that we are told are going to help us. And
Yeah.
then we go through a season of consuming the things that we told are good for us, the content on whatever, be it online or be it all the stuff that is fed to us. It's just like McDonald's.
Yeah.
We're fed stuff that we are told is art. Someone who is interested in fashion gets a subscription to a popular fashion magazine, and what you find is news about Hailey Bieber's birth. You don't get news about fashion.
Yeah.
And then maybe you're excited, you buy it, you do your part, you spent the money, so you tend to have received what you want. But then in the middle of the night or somewhere further along the line after years, you realize it and you just ate McDonald's.
Yeah.
People want real stuff,
Yes. Yeah.
so give it to them.
Yeah. My gosh, that's so good. People are thirsty for realness, like they're thirsty. Yeah.
They're
You're
starving.
starving. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's
what's
so
wrong.
good.
That's
Yeah.
what's wrong with all of us.
Yeah.
Don't you think that it's just we're trying going through the motions, and someone says buy this and do this. Now we're watching this on TV now. It's
Mhm.
the Olympics, and that should hold you over for the next 3 weeks. And then certainly some sort of
Yeah.
professional football season is starting after that, and then that'll hold you over, and that we're just being
Yeah.
held over.
Yeah. Yes.
Interrupt the process.
Yes.
Announce that your finger paintings are on display at the local museum.
Yes.
For $10.
Yeah. That's good. I love that. Thank you for that answer. That's so good. That's so good. Okay. So I would love to ask you, you talk a lot about how to ensure that the artist and the creative doesn't burn out, um, doesn't give up in the fight. And
Yes.
you've talked a little bit about that already. One thing you brought up super briefly in just the experience of grief is also heartbreak. And I had let you know previously that one of the things that drew me into your work is your interpretation of creative collaborators and how maybe in some instances, maybe a partnership that we thought was romantic really should have just been a creative collaboration. Doesn't apply to everybody, but it might apply to some people. So I would love to know, kind of blending those two together, how can creative collaborators or how can creative collaboration help to ensure that the creative or the artist doesn't burn out? How can one
Yeah.
kind of help
I
the
love this
process of the
question.
other?
Yeah, I love this question. Let me get my thoughts together. Your question is how
Mhm.
can the question is about burnout, staying in the fight. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, it goes back to who are you?
Mhm.
I'm creative and God told me I am. So that's it.
Yes.
That's it. What comes with that is realizing once you get on the same page with that you start to take yourself seriously. You're not whatever version of the stuff that you're hearing online about yourself. You're not certainly not who your shame is. I'm
Mhm.
creative. And so
Yeah.
then if you say that, that means that there's a whole universe of depth inside of you that needs attention. There's all these layers inside of you that are sad and upset. They need
Mhm.
watering. They're thirsty.
Yeah.
You're creative and you haven't been watering your creativity in some time. If you take that part of you seriously in the way that I think we are asked to with our life, then you start to see like, okay, I'm having this longing. I need to be seen. I want to be held. I want someone to believe in I want to grow. I want to build, as people say. I want someone to come along and believe in me and support me. And I think these are feelings that come in large part from our creativity. It comes from the desire to be in love and romantic partnership and with friends and community. But our
Yeah.
creativity needs that. You can't do this alone.
Yes.
You need someone to be like, man, I get you. I
Yeah.
love what you said and I want to help.
Yeah.
Man, I believe in you. Let's do something together.
Yeah.
You need that. You need that for a lifetime. Your art cannot grow, develop. You certainly can't do this stuff alone because
Yeah.
it's hard. You need a friend. You need a creative friend where the thing that you have in common is not tacos, not shopping, but
Yeah.
creativity.
Yes.
And having, I think it's found, to answer your question, I think it's, again, like I've said the whole time, there's a foundation of you need to take your art so seriously that it governs your choices. It's how, again, how do you, I know that you're telling me that I have such and such attachment style and I have such and such thing to be shamed about. I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
You need that threshold. In the same way, you need to say, okay, what am I craving? What is next? What is my art demanding? Man, I really want to write this essay, but I don't have some of it, so I need to find some help. If you deny yourself of that, said another way, if you squander creative energy, either by not using it because you can't get out of your own way, or if you squander creative energy, which is the same as sexual energy,
Mm-hmm.
inside of a space where there's chemistry. Oh my God, the chemistry is delicious.
Yes.
Oh, you and that person. It is, whoa. And so you're like, man, let's make a partnership out of this. Let's make a romantic partnership out of this. But maybe that was something for your creativity. My point is, if
Yeah.
you want to stay in this art stuff for a lifetime, you have to put your art stuff first in a way that you have never done, in a way that you did not need to when you were a child. When you were a child, all you had to do was be talented and go to school and do what your teacher said. Wait
Yeah.
for your teacher to give you permission. Now you have to do all of that stuff, is my point. And so if you want to stay in art for a lifetime, one, take this so seriously that your art is making your choices for you. What am I going to
Mm-hmm.
eat today? I need this so I can create later.
Yeah.
Who am I going to be friends with? What are my boundaries? What am I going to read? What parties am I going to go to? Who am I going to sleep with? I'm not saying you need to be celibate, none. Lord knows if you know anything about me, that's not what I preach.
Yeah.
Sensuality in the body and
Yes.
sexuality are huge for creativity, at least for me. I'm not saying keep yourself away from all of that. I'm saying develop the discernment, and the more discernment you have, if you develop discernment on your creativity, not just what society tells you to do, like, oh, it's bad to do this. No, as a creative person, you need to be irreverent completely in your art. That's what it's for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Develop some discernment in that. I can give you an example in my own life. There was
Mm-hmm.
years back, there was this collaborator that I had in opera. He's a pianist.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful man.
Yeah.
One of the most beautiful men I've ever seen.
Wow.
Gorgeous gentleman. Does
Mm.
all of the right things for me in every way.
Yes.
And I could have,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I really could have. But I just also, but the chemistry, I was just like, I also saw all of the other girls, guys,
Mm-hmm.
tripping all over themselves. And I was like, I'm going to be the one. I'm going to choose my creativity
Yeah.
right now. Because my bot is fine. I can find another guy. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my creativity first, and I'm also gonna put his creativity first. I'm gonna
Mm.
go out of my way to acknowledge some aspect of him. And then what happened was that all of that chemistry that was mutual went into the art. And it
Yeah.
was one of the best performances I've ever had. It was delicious for the audience in the way that we see, like, what is it on Scandal? Olivia Pope and what's his name?
Fits.
Yes, whatever his name, fit, whatever.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
chemistry we had on stage. And let me tell you
Yeah.
what the audience loved it.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Reveled in it. Yeah.
And now it's a friend. And we'll
Mm-hmm.
have that as a memory, and that's the foundation, and he'll always be there for me. He's always going to text me back.
Yeah.
And that's all you want,
Yeah.
someone to text you back. But again, it goes back to what I said. Creativity is more of a lifeline than we think. If
Mm-hmm.
you want that text back, you want to be seen, held, you want to build with somebody. Maybe your creativity is the lifeline to that,
Yeah.
because creativity is godliness, and God gives us what we need.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. And I also think some of what you're saying in that too is something else you've expressed around, there's a lot of push in creativity now to like go back to our childlike state, but we need to be operating
Yeah,
from the place of an adult. And you've said
yeah,
that, like, what decisions am I making to honor my creativity? I'm going to eat this thing because it's going to help me be creative later. I'm going to do
yeah,
like making adult decisions around our creativity. So I think that's so
Yes,
beautiful.
it's a joy. It's a
Yeah,
joy.
yeah.
Because that's what I admired when I was a little girl looking at interviews of Toni Morrison. They were an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying abandon your inner child, not for a second.
Yeah,
That could be a whole
yeah,
other podcast, but
yeah.
there is something, there is some, again, all of these
Mm-hmm.
spiritual things draw attention to the first half of your spiritual life and the second. All of them do that.
Yeah.
That's the
Yes.
meaning of being born again,
Mm-hmm.
pearly gate, the great eye of the needle. There's a
Mm-hmm.
separation. When we're
Mm-hmm.
children, we're being guided. There's
Mm-hmm.
infatuation with other people who are better than us. Our teachers are giving us permission before we learn the next lesson, etc.
Yeah.
In this second half of your creative life and your spiritual life, you must decide
Yes.
because you're writing again, you are etching something into the eternal memory.
Yes.
You can't wait.
Yeah. That's so
That's what I mean
good.
by being a grown up.
Yeah. I love that. That's so good. I think just kind of in summary, this has been just so good and so profound. I feel like there's so many lessons and tidbits here for creatives and artists to take away from this conversation. So thank you for showing up so
Oh,
vulnerably and transparently
thank
and
you. You
beautifully.
asked the
And
best questions.
yes, thank you. Like this was just so good. I think something else I've seen in your work recently is just like this villain era challenge. And I think it goes back to what you were saying before around just the villain's purpose. Not even just
Yeah.
the villain, but even the shadow's purpose to push us into our full self. Just everything. Anytime I see any of your work, I'm just like, it just pushes me to a new level, a new perspective. And I think that's so impactful. So thank you. Can you let folks know where to find you online, where to support your work?
Thank you. Yes. If you're interested in my singing, the soprano version of me, you can go to my website there, vanessaaldrich.com. And if you're interested in this exploration of creativity, that's what the lion's share of my TikTok is. And Vanessa is life is my handle, or like the actual at is Vanessa Dome's life.
Yeah.
For all of my resources, for my services, the one-on-one stuff, the workshops, we have a great community of workshop and reading groups and stuff like that. A note from self.com is the name of that website. The self being your high self, the eternal self that you're listening to always.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. And I will make sure to link all of those things in the show notes below so
This
people
was
can
so
find you.
fun to do this
Thank you.
forever.
Yeah, this was so great. I loved our
You're the best.
conversation. Thank you. You're the best.
Thank you.
An incredible conversation with Vanessa Aldrich. Vanessa, thank you so much for taking some time to be on the show. So deeply intrigued by your mind. Thank you for showing up and sharing all of this brilliant wisdom on the show today. It was so meaningful to me, and I know it'll be so meaningful to all of the listeners. Folks tuning in, I hope you found this episode inspiring, informative, transformative. I hope that you were able to take something away from it. If you loved this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or two or more. A 5-star rating and a positive written review. The text to the show. The text the show is in the show notes below, or a voice note. Let me know what you think. I so appreciate you taking the time to tune into this episode. Friend, I will catch you on the next one. Until soon.